I turned 68 last March, and I thought I finally understood what alone felt like. I was wrong. My wife, Carol, passed 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 6 weeks from diagnosis to the last morning, I held her hand in that hospital room in Raleigh. After she was gone, I learned to cook eggs the way she used to. A little butter, low heat, never rushing them. I learned to grocery shop on Tuesday mornings when the store is quiet. I learned that grief doesn't shrink, you just build a bigger life around it so it takes up less of the total space. I thought I was doing okay, I really did. My son's name is Nathan. He's 41 now, works in commercial real estate out of Charlotte. Smart kid, driven. I used to brag about him to anyone who'd stand still long enough to listen. How he put himself through UNC. How he closed his first major deal at 29. How he coached his son's little league team on Saturday mornings. I was proud of that boy in a way I couldn't always put into words. The kind of proud that sits quiet in your chest and doesn't need an audience. He married Jenna 6 years ago. Jenna is, how do I say this without sounding like every father-in-law who ever lived? She is not a bad person. I want to be clear about that, even now. But somewhere along the way, she and her mother, Roxanne, decided that Nathan's life needed reorganizing. And reorganizing, in their view, meant that I needed to be moved to the edges of it. It happened slowly, the way these things always do. First, it was the holidays. Thanksgiving at Roxanne's place in Greensboro 2 years in a row because it's easier with the kids. Nathan's kids, my grandchildren, Brody and little Mia, would call me on Christmas morning from Roxanne's living room, their faces in a phone screen while I sat in my kitchen in Raleigh with a plate of eggs I'd cooked too fast because I wasn't paying attention. Then it was the weekends. Nathan used to drive up once a month, just the two of us, watch whatever game was on, order pizza, not even talk that much, just be in the same room. Those visits got shorter, then less frequent, then they more or less stopped. He always had a reason. Jenna's family thing. The kids had practice. Work was brutal that week. I told myself it was normal. Kids grow up, they build their own lives, their priorities shift. I'd had my own father tell me once that the hardest part of being a parent wasn't the early years. It was learning to stand at a distance and watch your child choose someone else's table over yours. I thought I understood that when he said it. I understand it differently now. The part I didn't see coming was the money. I own a small chain of hardware stores, 3 locations across the Triangle area of North Carolina. Nothing glamorous. Nuts, bolts, paint, lumber. My father started the first one in 1971. And I took it over in 1994 and built it into something real. 31 employees across 3 stores. Vendors I've shaken hands with for 20 years. A business that has a heartbeat because people showed up every day and did honest work. I had always planned to hand it to Nathan eventually, not give it to him, but bring him in, teach him the operation, let him grow into ownership the way I grew into it. We'd talked about it. He seemed interested, at least he used to. About 8 months ago, I started noticing things. Nathan began calling more often, which surprised me at first. I thought maybe the distance had finally bothered him the way it bothered me. But the calls had a different texture to them. He'd ask about the stores in ways that felt less like curiosity and more like accounting. How are the leases structured? What's your arrangement with the Garner location manager? Have you thought about bringing in a partner? I answered his questions. I was happy to talk shop. I didn't think anything of it. Then my accountant, a good man named Phil who has done my books since 2003, called me on a Thursday afternoon and told me something that sat in my stomach like a stone. Someone's been requesting financial records on your business, Phil said. Through a third party, a law firm out of Raleigh. I didn't recognize the name, so I did a little digging. He paused. The firm does a lot of estate planning and conservatorship work. I asked him what conservatorship meant in plain English. He was quiet for a moment. It means someone may be exploring whether they can petition a court to take over management of your affairs, on the grounds that you're not capable of managing them yourself. I sat with that for a long time after I hung up the phone. Conservatorship. The word felt clinical and cold and completely disconnected from anything I recognized about my life. I am 68 years old. I run 3 profitable businesses. I pay my taxes on time. I remember every employee's birthday. I beat Phil at golf 3 times last summer. I am not a man who needs to be managed. But someone had decided to look into whether I could be. I didn't call Nathan. I thought about it, picked up the phone twice, put it down both times. Because something in me knew that if I called him and confronted him, one of two things would happen. He'd deny it, and I'd have no way to know the truth, or he'd admit it, and I'd say things I couldn't take back. Either way, I'd lose information I needed. So instead, I called my attorney, a woman named Patricia. Not from the list. Actually, her name is Susan. Susan Hartley. I've known her for 12 years. I explained what Phil had told me. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I've always valued about her. Don't react yet, she said. Let me find out what's actually been filed, if anything. In the meantime, act normal. Don't change anything visible. Don't move money. Don't restructure. Don't tip your hand. Act normal. That turned out to be the hardest instruction I'd ever been given. I want to tell you what it feels like to sit across from your son at dinner. We did have one dinner. About 3 weeks after Phil's call, at a steak place Nathan suggested near his office in Charlotte. And smile and ask about the grandkids and listen to him talk about a commercial property deal in Mooresville, all while knowing what you know. It feels like watching a play where you've already read the script but you're pretending you haven't. Every time he laughed, I felt something crumble slightly behind my ribs. Not anger. Not yet. Something sadder than anger. Jenna wasn't there that night. It was just the two of us, which hadn't happened in a while. And honestly, there were moments during that dinner where I almost convinced myself I'd gotten it wrong. He was warm. He asked about my knee, which I'd been having trouble with. He told a story about Brody that made us both laugh so hard the table next to us looked over. For about 40 minutes I sat there thinking, maybe Phil misunderstood. Maybe this is something else entirely. Then he said casually, somewhere between the main course and the check, "Dad, I've been thinking, you work too hard. Have you ever considered stepping back from day-to-day operations? Bringing in a management company? You could travel, relax, enjoy the equity without the grind." And there it was, wrapped in concern, delivered with a smile. "I'm not ready for that," I said, just as casually, just as warmly. He nodded. "Of course, just a thought." I paid for dinner. I hugged him in the parking lot. I drove home on I-85 and gripped the steering wheel the whole way. Susan called me the following Monday. What she'd found wasn't a formal filing. Not yet, but there had been preliminary consultations. The law firm Phil identified had been retained. The grounds being considered were what she called cognitive and functional decline. Apparently, there had been some documentation being gathered. Statements, she said. Possibly from people who knew me, possibly from a doctor. A doctor. I asked her if that was possible, if someone could just go find a doctor willing to say I was declining without my knowledge or participation. "There are evaluations that can be requested by concerned family members," she said carefully. "They're meant to protect people who genuinely can't protect themselves, but they can also be misused." I spent that night in my workshop behind the house. I go there when I need to think. It smells like sawdust and WD-40 and the particular kind of quiet that only exists when you're the only one awake on your street. I built a bookshelf I didn't need. I sanded the same edge probably 40 times. And somewhere around midnight, with the shop light buzzing overhead, and my hands covered in fine wood dust, I made a decision. I was not going to fight this by getting angry. I was not going to call Nathan and confront him, and give him the chance to lawyer up, or pivot, his story. I was going to be careful, methodical. I was going to do what I'd done every time the business hit a hard season, assess the situation honestly, make a plan, execute it quietly, and let the results speak. The first thing I did was call Dr. Emmons, my physician of 16 years. I told him what was happening and asked him to do a full cognitive evaluation, every test available, and document everything thoroughly with dates. I wanted a record that was ironclad and current, and signed by a doctor who actually knew me. Dr. Emmons didn't even hesitate. "I'll have my office set it up this week," he said. "And for what it's worth, you're one of the sharpest patients I have. I'm sorry you're dealing with this." I thanked him and moved to the next item. Susan began a quiet audit of what the opposing law firm actually had. She has contacts, knows how to ask questions through appropriate channels without alerting anyone. What came back was something I hadn't expected. One of the witnesses to my supposed decline was someone who worked for me. A manager at my Garner location, a man named Todd, who had apparently been having private conversations with Jenna's family for at least 2 months. Todd. I had given that man a raise 18 months ago. I'd sent flowers when his mother was in the hospital. I'd worked side by side with him during a roof leak crisis. 3 winters back when half the store's inventory was at risk, and we were there until 2 in the morning moving boxes. Todd. I will tell you honestly, that one hurt more than Nathan did. But I kept moving. Susan advised me to do one more thing, and this was her idea, not mine. She suggested I change nothing about the business structure visibly, but that I work with her and my financial advisor to quietly establish a revocable living trust, move the business assets and real property into it, and restructure the succession plan so that any conservatorship petition, even if granted, which she thought unlikely given what Dr. Emmons would document, would have limited practical effect on the actual operation of the stores. They're looking for control, she said. If the assets aren't structured the way they're expecting, there's nothing to control. I told her to move forward. This took about 6 weeks. During those 6 weeks, I continued acting normal. I called Nathan on Sundays, the way I usually did. I sent Brody a birthday card with a $20 bill tucked inside. I texted Jenna a photo of Mia's drawing that she'd mailed me, a purple horse, very abstract, and said I was going to frame it. I meant that. I still have it. I also, quietly, let Todd go. I did it professionally and with a severance package that was more than fair. I told him the Garner location was being restructured, which was true enough, and that his positions was being eliminated. He seemed unsurprised. That told me something. The thing about this whole stretch of time that I keep coming back to is how ordinary the days looked from the outside. I'd open the stores in the morning. I'd do the walkthrough at each location, check in with the managers, look at inventory numbers. I'd eat lunch, usually something I'd packed, turkey sandwich, chips, whatever was quick, at the small desk in the back of the Apex store while I reviewed invoices. From the outside, nothing had changed. Inside, I was rebuilding everything load-bearing in my life, quietly, methodically, before anyone realized I'd picked up the tools. Susan filed the trust documents in early February. 3 days later, Nathan called and asked if he could come up to Raleigh that weekend. He said he wanted to talk about the future. He used that word specifically, the future. I said, of course. Come Saturday. I'll make the guest room up. He arrived alone. Jenna stayed home, which I noted. We had lunch at the kitchen table. I made a pot of chicken soup from scratch, which I've been making every winter since Carol taught me the recipe. Nathan had 2 bowls, which I also noted. After lunch, we sat in the living room. He had a manila folder with him. I pretended not to notice it. He started slowly. He said he was worried about me. He said he'd been talking to some people. He didn't say who, and they shared his concerns. He said he'd read that men my age who'd lost a spouse sometimes experienced cognitive changes that weren't always obvious to the person experiencing them. He said all of this very gently, in a voice I recognized as the one he'd used as a teenager when he wanted something, and was trying to frame the ask correctly. Then he opened the folder. It had some papers in it. He slid them across the coffee table toward me. I had an attorney put this together, he said. It's a voluntary arrangement. A power of attorney, just for the business side of things. It would let me help manage things while you focus on the parts you enjoy. It's not taking anything away, Dad. It's just protection. I looked at the papers. I looked at my son. I thought about Carol, about how she used to say that the most important conversations we have are the ones we almost don't have. I thought about 31 employees who showed up to work every morning because my name was on the door. I thought about Todd. I thought about Roxanne. Then I reached into the folder, picked up the papers, and set them neatly back down on the coffee table. Nathan, I said, I know about the law firm. I know about the conservatorship consultations. I know about the financial records requests that went through Phil's office. I know about Todd. The color in his face changed. It happened fast. I had Dr. Emmons run every cognitive evaluation available to him about 6 weeks ago, I continued. I have a 40-page document signed and dated by a physician I've had for 16 years saying I am cognitively and functionally fully competent. I'd be happy to share a copy with anyone who'd like one. Nathan opened his mouth. I held up one hand, gently. I'm not finished. About 5 weeks ago, Susan Hartley, you've met her, my attorney, completed a revocable living trust. The stores, the real property, all of it, structured so that any external petition for control would have nothing to grab onto. That's done. It's filed. It's not reversible by anyone except me. The room was very quiet. I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. I want you to understand something, I said. I'm not angry at you. I've tried very hard not to be, and mostly I've succeeded. But I am going to tell you some true things, and I need you to hear them. He nodded. His jaw was tight. I built those stores with my hands, and my father's example. I gave 30 years of my life to that business. When your mother got sick, I kept those stores running because I had to. Because people counted on me. Because she would have been upset if I'd let them fall apart. And when she was gone, those stores were part of what kept me standing upright. They are not yours to manage. They are not yours to petition away from me. And I am not a man who needs to be managed. Nathan was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was different, smaller. Jenna thought. He started. I know what Jenna thought. I said, I know who was driving this. I'm not naive. But you are my son. You are 41 years old, and you are not a stupid person. And somewhere in this, you made a choice. I need you to understand that I know that. He looked at the coffee table. He looked at the folder. He pushed it aside. I don't know what to say, he said. You don't have to say anything today, I told him. But I'd like you to do one thing before you drive home. I'd like you to think about your grandfather. About the man he was. About what he built and why. And I'd like you to think about what kind of man you want Brody to grow up, seeing when he looks at you. Nathan left around 4 in the afternoon. I stood on the front porch and watched his car pull out of the driveway. The February's sky was that flat gray color it gets in the Carolinas before a cold front comes through. I stood there until I couldn't see his taillights anymore. I went inside and heated up the rest of the soup. I sat at the kitchen table and ate it slowly, the way Carol always told me to. Outside the window, the light was changing. I won't tell you things are resolved between me and Nathan. It has only been a few months. He called the following Sunday, the way he sometimes does, and we talked about Brody's spring soccer and a contractor issue at the Mooresville development and whether Panthers had any realistic shot next season. We didn't talk about the folder on the coffee table. Maybe we will eventually. Maybe we won't. Some things between fathers and sons get said once and then live in the space between you, waiting. What I will tell you is this. Those stores opened on Monday morning, same as every Monday. My managers showed up. My employees showed up. There are 31 people counting on the fact that I am still standing, still sharp, still the man whose name is on the door. And I am. I am 68 years old. I cooked eggs this morning, low heat, a little butter, the way Carol taught me. I did not rush them, and I am still here.